The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. It's time for Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. We'll talk all things Hokie wrestling with Coach Tony Roby and staff. Now, let's join your host, Hall of Fame wrestling writer and broadcaster, Jason Bryant.
Episode 97 of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling, bringing back one of the Hokies of yesteryear, an All-American, currently the head coach, finishing up his second year at his alma mater of the Hill School in Pennsylvania. That is Mr. David Hoffman. Dave, welcome to the program, man. It's been a while.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I see, things don't really travel far away. You found your way back to Pennsylvania, and I guess before we even get to what's life been like for you, but you're back in your old stomping grounds, coaching at your old high school, finished up year 2. What's that experience been like?
It's been good. There were some adjustments, moving home, maybe more personal than professional. It's the first time I'd lived home, near family in 17 years. So, when we were making our list of pros and cons as far as, staying going, the number one pro was we get to see family more. And then the number one con was we have to see family more. So, it's just an interesting mix, but it's been great. I have 4 brothers, 3 of them live in the area. Most of them have kids except for the one that's living in New York City. So it's been good to get to spend some time around nieces and nephews and my grandparents and parents. So all in all, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, and just to avoid some confusion about the town name, see, I do this all the time, even though I live probably about an hour and change from Hill when I lived in Lancaster. You're in Pottstown, not Pottsville, which is famous for its brewery. You are famous for what? What is Pottstown famous for, other than yourself?
Crime. No, I'm just kidding.
Great recruiting pitch here.
No, I'm just kidding. The locals, we call this Potts Vegas, but no, Pottstown, not to be confused with Pottsville, where Yuengling is brewed. So, we're about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It's a nice area. It's a town that's kind of on the upswing right now. I would say back in the 70s and 80s, it was a very, very popular cruise destination. So people used to come from all over the place and bring their cars here. It's got a huge automotive industry, had a huge, manufacturing industry. Like Mrs. Smith's Pies was based out of here at one time. So, it fell on some hard times there for a little bit, but it's definitely back on the up and up right now.
And you got that mix there. You got a little bit of the Philly outskirts mixed in with bleeding into Pennsylvania Dutch country. So you get kind of if you like the city, if you like the country, you kind of get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, we do have it all here. So we're in what's called Montgomery County. So, but we're right on the border of Chester County, which is covered bridges and stone barns and horse country. So we're not far, like you said, from Amish country. We're about 45 minutes east of that. If you keep heading east, you end up in the city of brotherly love. But yeah, we're in a nice location. We're close to Baltimore, close to DC, close to New York City, obviously really close to Philadelphia. So, we're within striking distance from a lot of different things.
Let's go back in time and the opportunity to go to Virginia Tech. You went there when Keith Mourlam was the head coach. Pretty good accolades coming out of high school. You did pretty well at that big tournament out in Fargo. Senior wrestled there a time or two. But why did you ultimately choose Virginia Tech back in once you graduated in 2001?
I think 2 things. One, I had a great relationship with Dan Wirnsberger. He was the guy that really recruited me and spent time developing a relationship with me. It was difficult to see him go after year 1, but I did stay in touch with him. I worked a lot of his summer camps when he moved on to Bloomsburg, and obviously eventually working with him for 6 years at Bucknell. But he was the biggest reason, no question about that, Dan Wirnsberger. But other than that, I think it was opportunity. I knew that I wanted to wrestle Division I. I thought that they were a program, again, kind of on the upswing with Sean Gray, Chris Martin, Scott Justice. They were coming off of a pretty good finish. I think they finished 17th the year before. So I knew they had strong individuals. And Sean Gray was an idol of mine. So he was a Blair Academy kid. I was a Hill School kid. So I used to watch him wrestle at national preps. And I just remember him, his senior year, he had a big gash in his forehead and he had his head taped like Dan Gable. And he was just, if you've ever watched Sean wrestle, he was a savage. He was very physically brutal. And I liked that style of wrestling and I knew I'd have a great training partner. So when I went down there for my recruiting visit, I got paired up with him and he was my host. And it was a pretty quick decision for me. I knew that's where I wanted to go. So, and Blacksburg's, it's just a great place to live and go to school and to compete and train. So, it was a no brainer.
Yeah, and you kind of caught the tail end of the disco nights, the famous nights in with one Jeremy Gasick and Mike Mercado, of course, that were famous in the Sean Gray era. We may or may not get into that, but when you're going through and you had an opportunity to wrestle right out of the chute as a true freshman, what was that experience like?
It's something I wanted to do. I remember having a conversation with Dan Wirnsberger and just, a lot of kids, especially at that time, a lot of kids came in and they redshirted right away. And, I think it's pretty easy to kind of get lost in the shuffle when you go from, most kids coming out of high school, they go to Division I are the best kids in their program. So all of a sudden you're thrown into kind of, the lion's den where you're not necessarily the best guy on the team. And, if you're not on the road trips and you're not the guy, I think, like I said, I think you can get lost in the shuffle, and that's happened before. But it's difficult to really truly know what you need to work on until you've kind of been tested and, thrown into the fire, like, in competition. So you can have an idea of what you need to get better at, but until you're kind of exposed and learn those the hard way, you're never really going to know. So, I knew that I wanted to come in and be the guy right away and see where I was.
Yeah, in that era, Virginia Tech had left the CAA, I believe, in 1998. Actually, they were at the Fieldhouse at Old Dominion in the CAA championships, where one Sean Gray pinned my roommate. We won't really also go into that much, but then the move to the EWL. And looking at your freshman year, you're at a weight class that was pretty solid at 133, yeah. But you're in the EWL, and just even on your backside draw, after drawing the 5 seed right off the bat, boom, Rad Martinez, EWL, Chris Spieler, EWL, Phil Mansueto, EWL, Corey Ace is up there on the other side of the bracket, EWL. That weight class in the conference was a monstrous that year.
It was. I think at one time, 7 of the 8 guys were ranked in the top 20. My first college match was against Corey Ace, returning All-American at Edinburgh, which was quite an experience. It was. It was back and forth. I never got the best of Phil Mansueto, who's a pretty good buddy of mine now. He lives down in Chattanooga. Great guy. Jeff and Dalton Head, a couple of my teammates at Virginia Tech, back in the day, we were talking about it the other day, they're
known
twins.
By their proper names as Thing 1 and Thing 2.
Yes, because they're identical twins. The Mansuetos are identical twins. And, I think we compiled all of our records, the 3 of us versus the 2 of them. And it was like 0-11. So not good for the home team, but yeah, it was definitely a loaded weight. Brandon Lauer was in there. It was unfortunate. I remember my freshman year at NCAAs, 3 of my 4 matches were against conference guys that I'd seen multiple times throughout the year. So that's always difficult, especially as a young guy. I remember wrestling Rad Martinez at Clarion, and it was the worst I'd ever been beaten my entire life. I think he beat me like 8-0 and rode me for over 4 minutes, and just a memory that doesn't leave you. But, then I ended up knocking him out of NCAAs a couple months later. So, but it went both ways. I pinned Corey Ace my first match, and then, he beats me at EWLs, and, he gets set up a little bit better than I did at NCAA. So it's the way it goes sometimes.
What about the alleged rumor that you passed out while trying to pin Corey Ace? You forgot to breathe. Is that the story?
I have never heard that. Which time?
I think Tom Long likes to tell a tall tale that you passed out while trying to pin Corey Ace your first college match because you forgot to breathe.
That would be factually incorrect. No,
well, I guarantee you he's going to watch this and actually text me and be like, "No, it was this match that he forgot to breathe and passed out."
No, my first match went very well with him. My second match did not. I remember. Again, maybe my memory is not certain.
He didn't have much of a neck either.
No, he didn't. I remember, I feel like I hit him with a slide by, and I was taking him to his back and over rotated. And instead of getting 5 for me, it was 5 for him, and I ended up losing a nail biter, but it's like I said, it's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, moving forward, you end up going to the NCAAs 4 times. Your last 2 years, you see the number 1 seed early, and this is before we go to the 33 seeds. It was before we went to the 16 seeds, and coming out as the move to the ACC, the dynamic of the conference changes. There's a coaching change also in there with Keith Mourlam let go and Tom Brand's brought on. But before we get into the coaching change and some of the drama that's kind of followed the era when you were there, what's it like to draw the 1 seed 2 years in a row? I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, both those guys were 2-time NCAA champs. My true freshman year, I drew the 3 seed, David Douglas, who was a 5th-year senior from Arizona State. So, that wasn't a whole lot better. but yeah, Travis Lee is one of the all-time greats. Nate Gallick's one of the all-time greats. Style matchup, I did not match up well with Gallick, and that was a tough draw. My senior year, I was ranked as high as 4th, I think, in the country. And then I broke a bone in my hand and had surgery and ended up losing a bunch of matches and dropped to, I think I was nationally ranked like 13th. And like you said, that was when they seeded top 12. And there you go. Drew the number 1 seed right off the bat. So that's your reward.
Well, of course, you had one of the greatest final flurries, at least I remember that was 2005. I actually got up from the table. I'm not supposed to do this either as a member of the working media, because we'd become friends in that era. And you hit off the restart, you hit the sick little inside trip, hit Chirella, drops to his butt, 2 on the edge. There's a conference, it's confirmed. Just explain that restart and what goes through your mind in that situation where you're trailing against a really good guy. I mean, Josh Chirella is pretty nasty. Yes. And you've got 1 shot to win this match. I mean, just take me back through that, man.
I mean, I could probably sum that up in 2 words. It's called pure luck. Listen, Chirella is a really, really great wrestler. And, had we wrestled 10 times, he'd probably win the majority of those. But I was lucky enough to win the one that we did wrestle. But I just remember for whatever reason, we were lucky enough that the action kind of took us out near my corner with 5 seconds left on the clock. And I remember Brands just grabbing me, by the shoulders and just saying, he's going to back out hard. I just remember him saying that and kind of shoving me back, towards the center. And, off the whistle, he immediately started to backpedal, and I kind of clubbed and dug an underhook. And it, like I said, I mean, it was more luck than skill. I go back and I remember, I don't know if I've ever seen the tape, but I remember I stepped on his foot as he was kind of backpedaling, and he fell backwards, and I fell into a double. And like you said, it was 2 at the buzzer. And they did review it for a pretty lengthy time, which, being in that moment it's pretty unsettling, to be there 4 times and to not get the job done. And, just knowing how much was riding on that moment. But I remember when they did raise my hand, I think, more than joy, I think I felt relief, that I guess maybe my life was validated. I spent a lot of time, wrestling and training, and, you wanted to walk away, with at least one, because, going into college, I saw myself doing a lot more, and unfortunately it didn't work out the way that I wanted, but it was good to get one.
How much does a moment like that change kind of the trajectory of your career post-college wrestling?
Night and day for me. I don't know if I would have gotten into college coaching if it wasn't for that. I'm sure you've seen the film on Dan Dennis, how he kind of, went off the deep end. I think I could see myself going more that route.
You're a van down by the river kind of guy.
I kind of am, Dan Dennis is somebody I like quite a bit. Great guy. I'm happy for him with the move back out to Iowa City. But again, a guy that lived down in Chattanooga that I got to spend a little bit of time with. Great guy. Like the guy a lot. So, but yeah, I mean, things work out the way that they should. I was lucky enough to get on the podium once, and again, knowing the right people. I remember Dan Wirnsberger calling me and asking me, what do you think about coaching with me at Bucknell? And I remember, at the time Bucknell didn't have a program. And so I just remember, did they even have wrestling? And he kind of explained the reinstatement process and what he was looking to do. And it was either go coach wrestling or go swing a hammer with my father. So, I remember my dad saying, "Hey, you can always come back to this. You may as well, and, go and give it a try." So, and more than anything, I think even more than getting on the podium, my time with Tom Brands and Doug Schwab, my last 2 years, prepared me to be a coach. Not from a technical standpoint, but just from my perspective on things, as far as making it about the athlete, not about myself. So they were huge in my development as a young man.
And speaking of Bucknell, that was also, not that far later, that long down the road. Daskalaskis, I think that's how you said, athletics center at Drexel. It's a quad, first match since reinstatement. Boom. Let's go knock off Maryland. Let's have Eric Lopatsky pin Hudson Taylor. Let's have you and Wirnsberger soak through every dress shirt you own. Explain what that day is like when you're starting a program from scratch with your former college coach. You've got, it was dead in the water and then came back. And then, Pat Santoro had Maryland rolling at that time. They were really on an upward trajectory. And here comes Bucknell. Welcome back. First match out of the chute.
Yeah, you talk about moments that you don't forget.
You remember how much you were sweating. That's one thing I vividly remember about you and Wirnsberger. I was there just watching how much you guys just pitted out at like 133. It was second match out of the chute, you guys are drenched.
It was an embarrassment. Yes, for sure. What's funny is, at the time I wasn't even dating who's now my wife, Lisa, and she came to the dual meet to watch. And, 10 years later, now we're married with 3 kids. But anyway, going into the match, we knew how good Maryland was. And, when you have 24 true freshmen on your roster, you have no idea what to expect. And I remember talking to Wirnsberger and just saying, "Hey, listen, the worst thing that can happen here is that we get beat 60-0. Maryland's a good team. Let's just go see where we are. We have everything to gain and nothing to lose." And, again, the cards fell right. Lopatsky pulled off a major upset and pinned a very, very, very good Hudson Taylor to kind of seal the dual meet. And it was a great moment, followed by a terrible loss to Drexel, the very next dual meet. So it's, it was a roller coaster ride that first year. And again, as those guys were trying to kind of find their way, there was no senior leadership to kind of show them the ropes. And what started off as maybe, something to overcome really ended up being the thing that made it special. It was that, we didn't have any, we'd have a bad culture, right? It wasn't like we had to get rid of guys. We allowed those guys to kind of build what they wanted that program to be. They had full say in it and they bought into what we were trying to do. And, year 2, we had an All-American. Year 3, we had 2. And, we had the ball rolling there for a little bit. So it was a great experience. It was, like I said, it was a lot of ups, lots of downs, but all in all, it was a lot of fun.
From a college coaching perspective, I've often said it's the second recruiting class that really makes the impact. The first one really gets eyes on the program, but it's the ones that follow that really kind of shake out the program. I'm looking back at that and thinking about some of the guys that were highly recruited in that first class that, for one reason or another, they got hurt, they had issue, they just, had enough wrestling and things like that. And then you get that second class. And then there's guys in there. There's guys from Bucknell that have a victory over Kyle Dake. Let's give Kevin LaValle a tip of the hat here for a minute. Just talk about maybe getting him out from Colorado. How does that happen?
What's funny about that is, I spent more time around LaValle except for maybe Nick Bracetta. That those are the 2 guys I think that I probably wrestled with the absolute most in their career. But we were also recruiting Justin Accordino at the time. And I remember Accordino beating LaValle and saying to Wirnsberger, "Why would we want this LaValle guy when we could get Accordino?" And he just, Wirnsberger just really liked LaValle and his Midwest work ethic. And if anybody I got to tip my hat to, it's Wirnsberger for sticking to his guns and saying, "No, this is our guy." I think he's going to be really good. So, in that first class, we had some really good kids. Dave Marble, was a guy that beat
Jimmy Kennedy
at NCAAs. he really had a great career. Shane Riccio, a guy that I don't know if he ever even medaled in the state of New Jersey, a guy that beat Nick Marable and some other, I believe, he had some great wins in college, and Andy Rendas. So that first class of guys was really good, but, LaValle was the one that really came in and having that 1-2 punch with Rendas and LaValle, where we had those guys on the podium, really kind of propelled us forward. There's no question. So,
Now the opportunity to go back to your alma mater, that's something you're doing now as a high school coach, but doing that as a college coach with the turmoil. And before we even get to the turmoil about Brands leaving and Dresser coming in, you were in that gap with Keith Mourlam, basically being relieved of his duties, and then, Virginia Tech and the late Jim Weaver making a splash and going after Tom Brands. What do you remember about that situation? Mojo is back coaching again. I saw him in Fargo, I think 2 seasons ago, going, I thought I'd seen a ghost. It's, he's looking trim, he's looking fit, but, some of the expectations of Tech wrestling in those later Mourlam years were not matched with the results. So what was it like when Keith got let go and then the administration made a big splash hire with Tom Brands?
Yeah, that was definitely a pivotal moment in my life and my career. I remember thinking, talking to my parents about asking for a release, and then, the next thing I knew, they'd let Mourlam go, and I just remember them saying, "Hey, let's wait this out. Let's see who we bring in, and if you don't like it, then we'll give you your release." But when they started throwing names around, I believe Sean Charles, it was Tom Brands, and possibly Lou Roselli. Don't quote me on that, but it was 3.
Roselli was a finalist for every job that year. Let's be clear, okay? Lou's been a finalist for every job he's ever applied for.
I guess so. But yeah, and I just remember saying, Brands, it's a no-brainer. And I was a huge Brands fan growing up. Again, I liked that punishing physical style of wrestling, and I thought it would be a good fit for me. So again, I think all things work out the way that they should, and they work out for a reason. And, I was blessed to have the right coaches at the right time. And I don't feel like that was a coincidence by any means. So, like I said, my 2 years with Tom Brands were life-changing. His persona, what people think about Tom Brands, couldn't be farther from the truth. He's a very misunderstood guy, in my opinion. So when I think, if I could describe Brands and Schwab and those guys and that crew guys with one word, it would be selfless. They always put everyone ahead of themselves, no matter what the situation was, whether it was big, small, it didn't matter. So.
Now, the decision to hire Kevin Dresser, coming across the street essentially from Christiansburg, and before that he was at Grundy, had a national championship career at Iowa, had been in the state. Those kids were winning state championships left and right in Southwest Virginia. So when all that goes down, you're an alum at this point. And what's the mindset? Because there was some questions about the stability of the program, and then here's a national champ right here. Let's just go with him. And all of a sudden, things are a little rough those first couple of years, and you're watching it as an alum. What's it like to watch the ascension of a team that was essentially left out, on the side of the road to be picked up because there was not a whole lot left after those 2 years to say now, New York City, they're holding a trophy at the NCAA championships.
It was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Was. As an alum, and I think I was in a little bit of a different situation than most guys, just because I was on the team with Brands as the whole transition was happening. So, I didn't know Dresser very well at the time. But, I guess I was wounded more than anything, just because I knew what my experience had been like with Tom. And, you just felt so much pride in Virginia Tech wrestling and what we had accomplished. And then to think it's all gone, it's all done. It was, it hurt. That's the best way that I can put it. I remember really, really being hurt. And I knew there was a lot of talk about, do we drop wrestling? Cause I think they pulled major strings to get Brands there. And then for him to be gone in 2 years, I think that was a major blow in some ways. And I think that, Dresser was the easy hire, but I mean, and looking back at it, I mean, it's the right hire. I mean, there's no question about that. The guy did a hell of a job with the program. To me, that you can't even argue that. I mean, the guy did a great job from day one. I think if you look at their finishes from year one, it wasn't impressive, but every single year, I think from the first to the last, we got better. I mean, the program improved as far as their NCAA finish. So, his work speaks for itself. So, and again, I don't, when I left and I took on the coaching job at Bucknell, I think I kind of distanced myself. I remember taking all of my Virginia Tech stuff, all of it, every sweatshirt, t-shirt, bag, and just boxing it up and just packing it away. I think it was the only way that I could deal with it. And, just try to block it out. That's kind of how I deal with things. It's just to pretend like, it's not actually happening. So, I think I avoided paying a whole lot of attention to him for the first couple of years and just really kind of poured myself into the Bucknell program and what we were trying to do. But I did compare. I did try to compare. I remember trying to compare, hey, what we were doing at Bucknell to what they were doing at Virginia Tech. And, I remember when we got our first All-American was before then we had our second. And I mean, there's that competitive spirit there. But listen, I mean, they built something really special there. There's no question. So it's pretty cool to see it to where it is now.
Yeah, you get brought back. And what's it like to re-enter the Hokie Nation after so many years away?
It was intimidating in some ways. They had a lot of really good lightweight guys. I just the competitiveness of the lightweight room. You had Gerard Garnett, you had Nick Brissett, you had Zach Nybert, you had Sal Mastriani, you had all these guys. There was never an easy day. I mean, the one thing I loved about that room was, a coach never had to pair an athlete with another athlete. It wasn't like, hey, you go with this guy, you go with that. I mean, guys before practice were always calling one another out. I mean, it was like, and it wasn't, there's a lot of rooms where, hey, you go with Johnny this go, and you go with Jimmy this go, and then you go with this guy. Then, the last go was, no, you're my guy for the whole day, and we're going to see who's better. And, Jesse Dong, Pete Yates, you talk about guys that are just uber competitive. I think those two guys are names that kind of get lost in the shuffle because they were really kind of the guys that laid the foundation of the Dresser era. But I'm telling you right now that Nick Brissett doesn't have the career that he had without Jesse Dong and Pete Yates. I can tell you that 100%. But it was not an easy room to be in, especially for a guy that's 32 with, a kid at home and just trying to survive. So, I mean, those guys brought it every single day.
Still got a couple of those old man tricks up your sleeve, right?
One or two. Yeah.
Now, when the opportunity comes up and, sometimes it's hard to leave. Well, you come back, you make a life change, you go home, or you're at least your second home, and then it's time to leave home again. Talk about the opportunity to coach in Chattanooga, and then obviously leaving Blacksburg had to be tough, and then you're at Chattanooga for a couple of years, and then you had to leave there to take the job now. So I guess sum up the last couple of years and what that progression's been like.
This is again. I mean, if you want me to be completely honest, it's. I loved my time at Virginia Tech, both as an athlete and as a coach. And this isn't a knock on anybody. You get a chance to bring in a Mike Zadok and Derek St. John. You're a fool if you don't do that. But when those guys came into the program, whether it was true or not, in my mind, the perception was, there wasn't a lot of room to grow. You had Dresser that was the head coach. You had Roby that wanted to be the head coach or be a head coach. Mike Zadok wanted, I think he had aspirations to be a head coach. St. John is very quiet. But there was a lot of competition for wanting to train and work with different guys. And, to me, that's what it was always about. It wasn't about anything other than my relationship with the guys and helping them grow as men and grow as wrestlers and spending time in the room. And when that role started to diminish a little bit, then I just, it was time for me to go. And that's, I don't have any hard feelings. I like all those guys. I keep in touch with every single one of them. So, I mean, I wish Dresser all the best. I wish Mike Zadok and all those guys all the best. So, but again, I mean, that's the natural course of things as an assistant coach. you should want to be a head coach. I mean, otherwise, what are you doing? So I thought that there was an opportunity for me to go to Chattanooga and kind of take that next step in my career and be a head assistant somewhere and again, be a part of a rebuilding kind of process like it was at Bucknell. And then, I thought it was a great place to live and work. And, when I went down there was no question for me.
It's a good wrestling town too.
It is. I mean, Chattanooga's, I'll tell you this, and as much as I love Blacksburg and as much as I love being home, I'd move back to Chattanooga tomorrow. To me, it's my favorite place that I ever lived, mostly for my life outside of the sport of wrestling. I love being in the woods, backpacking, hiking. It's the weather's great. It's just a great place to live and work and raise a family. So, there's a big part of me, a big part of my heart that's still in Chattanooga. One of my kids was born down there. So, again, I mean, all these things, they all happen for a reason. And again, I don't have any ill will towards anyone. I wish them all the best. But it was the right time to move on. I mean, that doesn't mean that it wasn't hard, because it was, but it was the right decision.
Now, coming back to Hill, this is a place that's got great tradition. It's also got a very proud alumni base, not just in wrestling, but around the world. It's got really good connections. And how soon does the opportunity really approach you to say, hey, I guess take us through the process of how you ended up coming back home?
They had reached out to me for 2 or 3 years in a row, and one of our alumni, a guy named Jamie Moffitt, who's written a couple books in the sport of wrestling.
Got a couple of them on my shelf. He's a Cornellian.
He is a Cornell grad, just a great guy, and he's a Hill family. So I just remember he was kind of my guy that I always went to and said, "Hey, is this the right move?" Out of all the alumni at Hill, he's at the World Championships. He goes to the NCAAs. He's got a great feel for where people are at and how serious they are, and his vision and my vision for the program were very much in line. So I remember asking him, like, "Hey, is this a good move?" And he said, "No, I can't in good conscience tell you that this is a good move." So I just remember the last time that I finally talked to him and talked to our headmaster here, that I felt like that we were all on the same page. And again, it was, the time was right, for a lot of different reasons. But Hill has a great history, great tradition. They've won 17 national prep team titles. They've had Olympians. They've had NCAA champ. We've had a number of All-Americans. So, it's Frank Bissell, the longtime coach here, is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. It truly is. There's one thing you can't create in this sport, and that's tradition. And especially in Pennsylvania, that's a big thing. So, it's something that can't be bought and something that we have. So I'm excited about where I am and the opportunity here.
You've always been kind of a guy that's been labeled as intense for one reason or another. What did you have to change about your coaching style from when you first got into coaching at Bucknell to your last college job at Chattanooga to now back in the high school room for the first time in, almost 2 decades? I mean, how different is that experience for you, and what did you have to change?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you got to realize that everybody's not wired the same as you. I love the expression in this sport that wrestling's not a one-size-fit-all sport. So, what works for me isn't going to work for another kid. So, and again, something I learned from Brands and Schwab was spending time away from wrestling with these kids, learning who they are as a young man, what their interests are, what's important to them, really will help you shape a plan for them on the mat. So to me, it's all, if you want great results on the mat, it's all about developing personal relationships off the mat. And that's something I think that we do a good job of here as a staff. And it helps when you're a boarding school, because you can have access to these guys 24 hours a day. You can have them into your home. But I think that was the biggest thing for me, is just to realize that, it's not everybody's like me. Not everybody is wired the same way or responds to tough situations the same as me. So, just take a step back and keep things in perspective is the biggest thing that, at the end of the day, we try to tell these kids, whether you win or lose, we're still going to care about you as a man. And I think that gives them a little bit of freedom to go out there and compete to the best of their ability.
Now, what is the makeup of Hill? You said it, you got the boarding school. Of course, you probably got some day students in there. I mean, well, one, were you a day student? I mean, you're not from that far away from that place, right?
Now, I grew up about 10 minutes down the road. So I was a day student for 4 years. There is a boarding requirement. So you have to live here for 1 year to graduate, whether you're 30 seconds down the road or you're, kid from one of the 30 countries from around the world that we have. So I believe we have like anywhere between 30 and 35 states and 30 and 35 countries represented. It's a pretty high-end premier boarding school that's well respected. But it's predominantly boarding. So I would say we have 525 students. I would say 400 of them live on campus. So we have about 100, a little more than 100 day students, but it's predominantly a boarding school.
And with the makeup of the national preps, of course, there's been a real push of probably 10, 15 years ago. Bishop Lynch down in Texas was making a real name for themselves. Of course, Blair has been at the top of the hill for, no pun intended, it's their hill, not yours at that particular moment. But, foot and mouth, here we go. So, and then, what Scott Green's done at Wyoming Seminary and before him, John Gordon. I mean, so there's more than just Blair to chase now. So when you're looking at your team's performance in year two, you had a trio of national prep All-Americans looking to break through and get into those more shiny medals, the gold, the yellow medals, as your former coach would call them. But what's it like to build a high school program when there's a boarding element to it, and you've got a very finite set of athletes to work with year in, year out? How does that work from the private school perspective of actually bringing them on campus to live, like with a boarding school like Blair or Sem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the national prep landscape is as good as it's ever been. You have Blair Academy, Wyoming Seminary, Malvern Prep was a top 5 program this year in the country. McDonough's been traditionally a great program that's produced good kids. You have Mount St. Joseph's, who's got a great program down in Maryland. There's a number of them. Baylor down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Macaulay. I'm trying to think of how many are in the Fab 50, but it's quite a few. So. And then you have a bunch of schools like, the Hill schools, the Bullis, those that have a sprinkling of really good elite kids to round things out. But, it's as far as like building the program, when your school's, close to $62,000 a year for high school, that's a difficult sell in the wrestling community. So, luckily like I said, we've got a great tradition here where we have some resource and some endowed funds to help build the program that truly go a long way, but it's an uphill battle as far as numbers go. My first year, I remember I got hired in August. Our admissions deadline is in January, so we were already 7-8 months removed from bringing any kids in. So my first year was, hey, this is who you got. So we had 3 kids returning from the year before, 3. So last year was probably the hardest year of my life. I think we had 9 kids on the team. But we're young and we build our numbers. We had 17, 18, 19 kids this year, and, we don't lose anybody again this year. So we're just going to continue to build, continue to grow and build on to what we're doing. We've built a great schedule. We're at Ironman, Beast of the East, Escape the Rock this year. So those are 3 really good events, and we're going to put our guys in front of the best colleges in the country. So, it's going to take some time. I'm not very patient. So I look at it as, year 1 was kind of a wash. This past year was really the first year where I had any kids on the team that I helped bring in. So we have some really good young kids, a handful of sophomore and freshmen. So I'm excited about what we have.
So now how often do you looking at some of the places like, okay, you're a kid. I know a lot about Bucknell. You should go to Bucknell. Oh, you're a kid. I think you should go to Virginia. I mean, how much of your connections now in college wrestling, I mean, even if your wrestlers go to a place that they have no intention of wrestling, how much is it as your role as an educator, as a coach, to say, I can help you based on my experiences on making a college decision?
I mean, it certainly helps as far as knowing different coaches and their coaching philosophy, their coaching style, as pairing them with personalities on our team. We have 2 juniors on our team right now that are close, probably Division III with an outside chance going Division I. I'm not as familiar with the Division III scene, obviously, as I am with the Division I, but I mean, they've kind of leaned on me for my thoughts and what to look for and, what the right questions to ask and what to look for on your visit, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that's going to play more of a role in the coming years. Like I said, we have most of our guys that are really good are freshmen and sophomore right now. But it's been fun. I mean, it's been fun trying to help these guys land at the right place. And obviously our school, being an elite academic school, they want to see our kids matriculate to to top universities. So I'm not going to push anybody anywhere. I mean, to me, it's all about fit. I mean, there's been plenty of successful people that have graduated from community college. Obviously there's probably more that have graduated from Harvard, but the point is that to me, it's all about fit and getting kids in the right place, in the right program, and putting them where they feel the most comfortable that they can grow and be who they are. So, like I said, I'm excited for that.
Spin it back to Blacksburg, since this is a Virginia Tech show, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Hokies as we close out in this episode. To one, how soon did you get to open that box back up that you had stowed away? And two, explain to me what it's like as an alum to watch Makai Lewis win the first NCAA championship in school history.
Well, Makai, that was pretty special, especially to do it against the guy that he did. I mean, Vincenzo Joseph's no slouch. I think he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. So, Makai Lewis, his story is just beginning. He really has the chance to write an unbelievable story and leave behind a legacy like no one before him at Virginia Tech, and that's really exciting. One of the few magazines that I have kept is the cover of USA Wrestler with him, with his hand in the air winning his national title. Makai, I remember, I was kind of going out. That was my last year as he was looking at Virginia Tech. And, I never coached him, but I certainly helped, or at least was there present when he was visiting. And talk about a kid that comes from, his father was just like the nicest, greatest guy ever. But just a humble kid, very soft-spoken, just a great kid. So can't say enough great things about that kid. But yeah, I mean, as far as unpacking Virginia Tech stuff, it took a while. I think probably until I went back and was a coach back in 2012, I started to unbox it and start to wear some of it again.
And how about unboxing it when you settled back in Pennsylvania? You can wear that stuff again now, not have to worry about it.
I got my Hokie shirt on right now. You really can't tell, but
well, it's because this is an audio podcast, Dave. They couldn't tell anyway.
Well, you can tell.
Yeah, that's true.
Listen, I mean, there's no one in the program that's ever been a part of the program that's more proud of what they're doing. So excited for Coach Roby. He was definitely the right guy to take over the program after Dresser left. I felt that passionately. I knew the guy. I know what kind of human being he is first. I know what kind of, what he's about. So, the program is good hands. There's no question about that. Like I said, I'm pumped about the future of the program. The recruiting class that they have coming in, as many great things as I think that we've done in the last 5-10 years as a program, this is just the beginning. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think when you see Katka and that group of guys coming in here, I mean, it's a shame that what happened with Brandon Green. I saw him competing at Escape the Rock, and at that time I didn't know that he was committed to Virginia Tech. So I got my phone out and I'm texting Roby. I'm like, you gotta watch this guy. And then I looked it up and saw on Intermat that he was committed to Virginia Tech, and it was like score one again for the home team. But that kid was special. There's no question. So they have a great group of kids coming in. It's exciting.
Yeah, adding another one, even though with the demise of my alma mater, Colby Allred from Great Bridge, coached by my good buddy Matt Small, he's going to be coming over too. He was, had to figure out his situation, and let's drive 4.5 hours west and find a home there. So at least Colby, I'm glad that he's going to be out there with Hokie Nation too. So Dave, any final thoughts for Hokie Nation as we wrap up episode 97 of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, in my time there, especially as a coach, just the relationships that I've was able to build there with the kids and their families, their parents. I just feel a huge blessing in my life to have been part of Virginia Tech, and through some odd transitions that people might not think about, the Mourlam and Brand's years, and it's changed quite a bit over time, but I couldn't have picked a better place to go to school. So go Hokies.
Hokie fans, listen to Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling anywhere you go by subscribing on Apple Podcasts. Go to InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com/iTunes. Or you can get the exclusive Android or iOS apps by going to InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.